We live in a society that ignores, sometimes even mocks, small things. So it makes sense that the Minish Cap doesn't get as much attention as the bigger, meatier Zelda games that everyone just wants to dig into. It's probably the shortest game in the series, and the main gimmick is Link can become tiny. If this was all you knew about the game, then you may think that the Minish Cap was trying to be the opposite of its 3D contemporaries, with their massive worlds and epic bosses, but I'm not so sure I'd agree. As a matter of fact, I believe that The Legend of Zelda, the Minish Cap, wanted to feel like a 3D Zelda game. In my opinion, 2D Zelda games and 3D Zelda games are differentiated by more than the number of axes that they're being played on. 2D games are typically more difficult, more creative, and focus less on being aesthetically pleasing. 3D games, at the time that the Minish Cap was created, could be beaten by someone with literal brain damage, and tended to play it safe. They had long sections in between dungeons that had to be slogged through. I'm not trying to say that 3D Zelda games are bad. As a matter of fact, I actually like them a lot. One good thing about them is that they make things look nicer and more thematic. The point I'm trying to get across is that 2D Zelda games have positive aspects that maybe don't get talked about as much on the internet. I'd like to take you guys down the list of 3D Zelda game stereotypes and see what the Minish Cap checks off. I very rarely saw the game over screen, meaning that the combat was pretty easy. As for the puzzles, some of them were ruined by Ezlo. Ezlo is your companion who adds commentary that spices up the game. If your idea of spicy is a jug of milk, most of the time he makes obvious and annoying remarks, as well as giving away the answers to puzzles I wanted to solve. I would check the Minish Cap off as being easy. It's hard to say whether or not this game takes risks. On the one hand, the villain isn't Ganon, but on the other, the story is basically a SparkNotes summary of the child portion of Ocarina of Time. It also uses a lot of enemy designs from the Wind Waker. There's nothing about this game that's groundbreaking. Now that I think about it, even the Wind Waker is willing to take some risks, like flooding all of Hyrule and removing tissues from Zelda canon. Perhaps the worst part of the Minish Cap are the menial tasks. Take the library quest for example. You have to go talk to some random Minish to open up the library, go to the library, learn about the missing books, find the people who have the missing books, then solve incredibly mundane puzzles to get them. I got lost a few times and it ended up taking me about an hour. The side quests could also be quite boring. Towards the end of the game, I got this bottle from the shopkeeper, but it was filled with dog food. I didn't want to trek all the way back to Lake Hylia because I just didn't care enough. So the dog probably died and I didn't get a bottle. The quests aren't the only boring thing in this game. Pretty much every Zelda game has charming, strange, creepy, sometimes even funny characters. The Minish Cap has tutorials. And if a character isn't being used to tell you what to do, then they're usually standing in front of a pathway telling you what not to do. Would you look at that? Every one of the points I created in this unbiased list have been checked off. This doesn't mean I hate the game, I actually like it, and there are a few corrections I'd like to make. In terms of difficulty for combat, the final boss actually managed to kill me a few times. Look, it's not my fault that there's only like one fairy bottle in this whole game. In terms of difficulty for puzzles, the Wind Ruins forced me to use my brain, and is now one of my favorite dungeons in the whole series. All of the dungeons in this game were good and checked off the last requirement of a 3D Zelda game: style. Each dungeon had a distinct theme that related to its element. They also had major rooms that the entire dungeon revolved around, such as the barrel in the Deepwood Shrine, and the frozen Octorok room in the Temple of Droplets. Having a variety of dungeons is very important in my opinion, and this game did a good job of keeping a balance. One moment you're exploring a non-linear haunted ruins, and an hour of frustrating moments later, you're scaling a linear, combat-based tower. The bosses are also fantastic, so much so that I've decided to dedicate a video to them. How will I know when this video is released, you ask? Why, by hitting the subscribe and notification bell, I answer. In the meantime, why don't you watch another one of my reviews, specifically the Mario All-Stars one, because that's the only other review I've made. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.